There are things that become a part of you. They no longer are just tools, but extensions of who you are. The pen we reach for without thinking, the lighter that's flicked open with muscle memory, or even the pocket knife that's not just for cutting, but for the simple reassurance of its weight. These are things we carry, not for the moments we plan, but for the ones we don't. And a good handheld system should feel the same way, not a gadget you have to convince yourself to bring, but one that disappears into your daily routine, there when you need it, and forgotten when you don't. Today, we're going to be taking a closer look at the GKD PIXEL 2 to see if it earns its place among all the other EDC items we choose to carry, and how it compares to some of the other devices that are out there around this price point. So let's get started. When I received the device, the first thing that I noticed was the box felt like something you'd grab at a gas station as an impulse buy. Every other system that I've purchased came in a much better quality box, but alas, we're not reviewing boxes, so let's go ahead and open this thing up. And as expected, it's just the console itself along with a very sparse manual, if you can even call it that, and there's no charging cable. The whole thing's very basic. But when I finally picked up the GKD PIXEL 2, I felt this rush of excitement as it really did feel like they put a ton of effort into this compact device. There's zero rattling when shaking this thing, everything just feels super solid. And as I always do, I make sure to give the device a proper charge, but upon plugging it in and leaving it in the charger, for some reason this device did not want to hit 100%. It was stuck on 80% for over 4 hours, so I just unplugged it as is as I needed to begin the tests. I noticed that the battery was at 85%, so I tried an overnight charge to see if this remedied the issue, and it did. It might be just the charging cable that I was using. The next night, I made sure that the device was at 100% battery charge. I left it in standby mode. The next morning, around 9 AM, I found the device to be down to 65% battery life, which unfortunately isn't as great as, say, my RG35XX SP, where I can leave that in sleep mode for an extended period of time with minimal battery drain. This is something that could be fixed with future updates to the custom firmware, but for now, it's not great. The button layout is pretty standard. However, I instinctually went for the menu button thinking that was the power button, but the power button is actually this thin diagonal button above the battery light indicator. The device feels extremely well built and durable. This whole thing has got some weight to it. The face buttons feel solid and the ABXY buttons do not suffer from any clickiness. However, keep note the L1 and R1 buttons are a bit clicky, as well as the L2 and R2 buttons. The D-pad feels very responsive. It has some good tension. Start and select buttons labeled SE and ST are clicky, and the ABXY buttons are soft and offer some good resistance. And now here are some button combinations that I think you should know. When you're in the main menu, if you want to mute the background music really quickly, all you have to do is press the L1 button. To change the brightness up or down, hold the select button and press volume up or down. Another tip is to keep an eye out for the bottom icons. They will usually tell you what each button will do. For instance, on the home menu, you can see to access favorites, all you have to do is press X, so that can be very handy. When you're inside one of the system submenus, for instance, if I click handheld, pressing start will shrink all of the system icons, and pressing start again will unshrink them. And lastly, in the IUX menu, if you want to be able to quickly restart or shut down your device, in the main menu, just press start and a menu would pop up asking you if you want to power off or reboot the device. Moving on to the ergonomics, one thing I was surprised by was how comfortable it was to hold while being able to access the L and R1 buttons up top. However, the L2 and R2 buttons are pretty tricky to reach around and click, so I can imagine any game that requires extra shoulder buttons aren't going to be enjoyable at all to play. But most of the games you probably are going to play on such a tiny device won't require that extra set. But this was my biggest concern before getting the device, was looking at these photos and not really knowing how comfortable it would be to hold. And I can say without a doubt, it's much more comfortable than the Miyu Mini for those longer playtime sessions. The way this system is designed, with the shoulder buttons being on the top of the system, allows you to use your two pointer fingers as a direct point of contact to balance the entire system in your hand. It just feels like a very smart design choice for small handhelds this size, comparing that to the Miyu Mini, for instance, where the shoulder buttons were on the back of the system. Holding it for an extended period of time time started to give me hand cramps because of how awkward of a position it was. However, with this device, I don't see that being a problem. I'm actually quite shocked by how comfortable this thing is to hold. Moving on to user experience and functionality, upon first booting the device, I was met with a UI that was in Chinese, so that was my first gripe. I went into the settings, then went into the skins menu, and I shuffled around until I found one that I liked. Currently, there are only 3 themes, which are default, flawless, and this other one that's written in Chinese, but it looks the best in my opinion. Inside the settings menu, you'll also find language, date and time, skins, launcher, which in here you can change between IUX or the emulation station front end. You have save last selection and restart last game mode. There's also another option called white mode, which I turned on, and to turn on any of these settings in the menu, you need to press start, and after pressing start, this white mode basically allowed me to have expert access, and it opened up more settings like changing how the icons look, the size of fonts, including the clock font, and many more accessibility options to further customize your device. However, I didn't feel the need to leave this thing on, so I just left everything as default for simplicity's sake. The first game I launched was in Pico 8, a game called Birds with Guns, and it played well, and the normal save combination buttons that I'm used to worked perfectly fine, which is select an R1 to save and select an L1 to load. Then I jumped into the ports menu and I tried Stardew Valley, and it worked very well. I'm nearsighted, so I didn't have a hard time reading the super small font, but if this is something that you think you might have an issue with, just know some of the fonts on this screen can appear pretty small. One thing that I did inside of a game, when you click menu and you get into the RetroArch main menu, under main menu go into settings, user interface, appearance, and then change the scale factor. I currently have my scale factor set to 0.35x. I feel like that is the perfect sweet spot for me. However, you might want to mess around with that to see what works best for your eyesight, and then once you're done with that, always make sure to go into configuration file and save current config before exiting RetroArch. The types of games you're most likely gonna want to play on a system this small are gonna be the 16-bit games and below. The primary use case for this system for me is specifically for EDC. I'm gonna be importing Game Boy games, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games with some Sega Genesis titles, along with a carefully curated list of PS1 games and maybe some Dreamcast games that make the most sense for on-the-go playing. Games that I can quickly pick up, put in a few minutes, and put back down to get that retro fix. However, do keep note, during my testing, I found N64 and Dreamcast games to be particularly difficult to emulate. Most of the games had stutter, so if you're looking for a great all-around emulator, this might not be the system for you. However, if portability is the primary use case for a system and you're okay with being able to play games 16-bit and below, then I can see why you might be interested in picking one up. And that's where Mech DIY comes into play. Mech DIY actually sent this device to me to review. They did not pay for this review, nor do they have any influence on the outcome of this review. This is just me being 100% transparent with you guys. However, they do have a couple discounts that you'll find in the description below, which can help offset the cost of $89.99 before shipping and handling. I do have an 8% link with an additional, I believe, 15% off, but definitely try the links and codes, and even if it's not mine, search the web and see if you can find the best deal to offset that cost, because I don't think this device is truly worth over your $100 US. I think a sweet spot would be honestly $70. Getting into the OS of the system, the OS was something that I was actually worried about, so much so that I went ahead and preemptively downloaded MinUI, thinking that I would just absolutely hate the IUX experience, but you know what, I actually didn't mind it, and at this point, between emulation station's front end and the IUX menu, I actually prefer the IUX menu. It's not perfect by any means, but it gets the job done, and I kind of like how it looks. It's a little bit quirky, and it definitely has some missing features, but overall, I think it gets the job done. So between MinUI and IUX, there's also Plum OS that's available for download, so that's something if you're not interested in the IUX menu or MinUI, there's always that option as well. As for sound, the original Miu Mini is actually much louder than the GKD PIXEL. I think the GKD PIXEL at 100% sounds about like 75% of of the Miyoo Mini's actual sound, so they're not the greatest speakers. So that brings me to my final question. Is this an essential EDC item? Well, it depends on who you are and what you're looking for. If portability is your primary use case for a system, then this GKD PIXEL makes perfect sense. It's small, it's robust, it's well built, and it plays games up to 16-bit and below. However, if you're looking for your first device or a system that's great all around, at this price point, it just doesn't make sense. When trying to emulate games on the Dreamcast or N64 or even PSP, it's very hit or miss. The PSP performance is abysmal. One of the games that I usually test is Wipeout Pulse and Wipeout Pure, and both of them ran very terribly. It was just completely stuttering for the most part. But if you're looking for something that can be dedicated to those older retro titles, 16-bit and below, this thing is perfect for how small it is and how sturdy it is. So it really depends on you and what your use case is going to be for a device like this. So that does it for this review. I hope this sheds some clarity on this brand new device. Overall, I give this device a 6 out of 10. It's not perfect, but it does what I need it to do, and it's a nice addition to my collection. For those of you who made it this far into the video and have subscribed, thank you so much. You guys mean the world to me. You are helping this community and channel grow, and definitely stay tuned and hit that notification bell, because the next video there's gonna be an awesome giveaway. And out of all the systems that I own, I still keep suggesting this specific handheld that I think is the perfect starter handheld for beginners and collectors alike. So if you're interested in what that device is, definitely check out this video coming up right now.